Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
I found my CEO's mistress dead in our boardroom, and every piece of evidence pointed to me. He offered to save my career if I repeated his lie. Instead, I let him think I was broken and wired his IPO for the truth. The first thing Rook said when I found Vane dead was, "Don't touch the glass." I had not noticed the glass. I had noticed lying beneath the conference table, one heel missing, her dark hair spread across the white carpet like ink. I had noticed the overturned chair and the narrow streak of blood beside the brass model of Halcyon's new headquarters. I had noticed the city blinking through the windows 40 floors below, indifferent and expensive. But the glass mattered too. A champagne flute stood near my shoe. My lipstick color marked the rim. Was in the doorway behind me, still wearing the tuxedo from the investor dinner. His bow tie hung loose. He looked shocked in the way he looked compassionate during layoffs, precisely enough to be believed. He said, softer now, "Step away from her." I could not move. Had been alive 40 minutes earlier. I had watched her leave the ballroom after whispering something to that made his jaw tight. She was Halcyon Biotech's chief operating officer, the architect of our upcoming IPO, and the woman most employees believed would eventually replace him. She was also his mistress. I knew because 6 months earlier I had opened the wrong hotel suite door during a press tour and found Butning's shirt. They had stared at me until I apologized. After that, promoted me to chief communications officer. At the time, I called it trust. Now I understood it might have been payment. I reached for my phone, caught my wrist not hard. He never needed force when surprise would do. "Think before you call," he said. "What is there to think about? About how this looks?" His gaze moved from the champagne flute to the metal award on the carpet. The award had been presented to me that evening for narrative leadership. My fingerprints covered its polished surface. Someone had used its sharp base to strike behind the ear. My stomach folded. "I left that downstairs." "I know." The words came too quickly. Released me and dialed emergency services himself. His voice changed as soon as the operator answered. It became breathless, horrified, noble. "My colleague is not responding. There is blood. My communications officer found her." My communications officer? Not. Security arrived before the paramedics. Dorian Wren, Halcyon's head of corporate protection, sealed the elevators and asked me to surrender my phone for preservation. I refused. He glanced at, gave the smallest nod as if confirming a diagnosis. The police separated us. Detective Brooks asked when I had last spoken to. "At dinner," I said. "She told me she needed to show me something after the speeches." "What?" "She didn't say." Across the room, lowered his face into his hands. Detective Brooks asked whether I had argued. "No." A uniformed officer approached carrying a tablet. He showed Brooks an email recovered from his inbox. It had been sent from my account at 10:14 p.m. "Come to the boardroom alone. You have taken enough from me." I read it twice. "I didn't send that." Brooks did not answer. The paramedics covered his body. As they lifted the stretcher, her hands slipped from beneath the sheet. Something was written across her palm in black ink. 3 characters. "Yeah." My initials came close enough that only I could hear him. "You need me now," he whispered. Then Detective Brooks turned the tablet around and showed me the building log. My badge had entered the boardroom 17 minutes before it died. They questioned me until the sun rose over Manhattan and made the interrogation room look almost clean. Detective Brooks never raised her voice. She placed facts between us one by one, like cards in a game she had already won. My badge opened the executive floor at 10:07 p.m. My account sent the thread at 10:14. My award carried blood. The champagne flute beside her body held my fingerprints and traces of the sedative. A voice message arrived on his phone at 10:21. The voice was mine. "You should have stayed away from him," it said. "If you come upstairs, this ends tonight." I listened to myself threaten a dead woman. Every vowel sounded right. Even the slight scrape in my throat from speaking at the investor dinner was there. "That isn't me," I said. Brooks watched my face. "Do you drink?" "Not at company events." "Do you take sleep medication?" "No." "Did you know was sleeping with Rook?" I hesitated. That hesitation became an answer. Brooks leaned back. "How long?" 6 months, maybe longer. I walked in on them during the Boston conference. "And then he promoted you." I looked at her. "He said I was ready." "Were you?" I hated the question because I had asked it of myself every night since the promotion. Before Halcyon, I had spent 12 years cleaning disasters for politicians, hospitals, and venture firms. I knew how powerful people buried truth. First they called it nuance, then risk management, then loyalty. Had hired me because I could make a corporate apology sound like a human confession. I had believed I was using that skill to protect patients and employees. Used to call me the Undertaker. "You make bad news look peaceful," she once said. At 8:15, Victor arrived. Halcyon's general counsel wore the same tuxedo shirt from the night before, though someone had found him a fresh tie. He informed the police that the company would cooperate fully. Then he asked for 5 private minutes with me. Brooks refused. Victor smiled. "Ms. is represented by corporate counsel." "No," I said. Both of them turned. "I want my own lawyer." Victor's smile remained, but something behind it hardened. They released me without charges at noon. Outside, cameras already waited. Halcyon's stock was private, but scandal traveled faster than markets. Reporters shouted whether I had killed because of. My apartment door stood open when I reached home. Nothing obvious was missing. The television remained, my laptop sat on the desk, and the cash in my kitchen drawer had not moved. But my bedroom closet had been rearranged. Coats facing left instead of right. Shoes paired too neatly. On my pillow lay a black envelope. Inside was a photograph of me asleep. The angle came from the ceiling vent above my bed. On the back, someone had written, "You have been in the story longer than you know." My phone rang. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but fear wanted information more than dignity. He sounded exhausted. "The board is meeting. Victor thinks we can contain this." "It contains murder. Contain what they are doing to you." I stared at the photograph. What are they doing to me? Building a version of events that will survive facts. The phrase was mine. I had used it in a media training session 3 years earlier. Continued, "Come back to the office tonight. No police, no lawyers. I can show you who accessed your accounts." "Why would you help me?" There was a pause just long enough to feel intimate. "Because I know you didn't kill her." I looked again at the hidden camera photograph. "How?" I asked, breathed into the line. Then he said, "Because I know who did." I returned to Halcyon at 9, that night wearing a coat with my phone recording in the lining. It was a cheap precaution. Controlled the building, the cameras, the access logs, and half the people who interpreted them. If he wanted the recording gone, it would disappear with me. Still, pressing the red button made me feel less naked. The lobby screens had already changed. His photograph appeared above a statement praising her visionary leadership and promising full cooperation with authorities. I had written the template after a lab accident the previous year. My own language had become her wreath. Dorian escorted me to his office. He searched my bag but not my coat. His hands were efficient, almost apologetic. Stood at the window with 2 untouched glasses of water. He wore a black sweater instead of a suit. It was his costume for sincerity. "Sit down," he said. I remained standing. He opened his laptop and showed me a security report. According to the file, Cole, my deputy, had used an administrative credential to reset my email password 3 hours before the murder. "Oh," I said. "She says you asked her to." "I didn't." "I believe you." He said it with such warmth that for one dangerous second I wanted to be grateful. Explained that had been threatening several executives. She had moved money without board approval, vendor contracts, and attempted to blame him when auditors found the discrepancies. He said she had been unstable for months. Unstable, the favorite word of men who needed a woman's evidence to sound like weather. "She told me she was leaving Halcyon," I said. "She told everyone a different story." "Who killed her?" Walked to the bar and poured water from a sealed bottle. "Victor believes it was an outside contractor, someone connected to the trial sites." "That isn't a name." "No, it is a direction." He turned the laptop toward me again. An unsigned board resolution filled the screen. It placed me on paid leave, funded my criminal defense, and authorized Halcyon to issue a statement describing me as a victim of credential theft. It was everything I needed. All I had to do was sign an affidavit. The affidavit said had become obsessed with, threatened to destroy the company if he ended their relationship, and tried to recruit me into a scheme to blackmail him. "You want me to lie about a murdered woman? I want you to tell the part that protects you. She never recruited me." "Then say she implied it." "She didn't." His expression softened. "You are confusing moral purity with survival." I had heard him use that tone with junior employees, journalists, regulators, and once with a patient whose husband died during a Halcyon trial. He made surrender sound like adulthood. "What happens if I refuse?" "Nothing from me." He sat opposite me. But the police will test the sedative in your blood. They will find the draft emails on your laptop. They will interview. The board will release every internal complaint ever filed about you. I never saw a complaint. You were not meant to. The room seemed to shrink. Reached across the desk, palm up. Let me protect you. I thought of the photograph on my pillow. The access badge, my cloned voice. I also thought of what had written on her hand. Yeah, maybe she had named me. Or maybe she had tried to send me somewhere. I lowered my eyes and let my shoulders collapse. What do I have to do? I whispered. Exhaled. Relief flashed across his face before compassion returned. He slid the affidavit closer. First, he said, you need to understand that was not the victim you think she was. Then he opened a folder marked EA and showed me 12 years of files about my life. The folder contained my tax returns, medical history, apartment leases, therapy invoices, and screenshots of private messages I had sent before joining Halcyon. There were photographs of me entering clinics, restaurants, and hotels. One showed me crying outside a courthouse after a client's corruption trial. Another showed the inside of my apartment 2 years before the hidden camera image on my pillow. The earliest file was dated 4 months before recruited me. You investigated me before the interview, I said. We conduct due diligence on senior hires. This is surveillance. This is why I know you. No apology, no embarrassment. He said it like intimacy was a service he had purchased. Tapped a therapy note. It described my fear of becoming useful to cruel people. The note had come from a wellness platform Halcyon quietly acquired through a shell company. You were afraid you would help the wrong person, he said. Then you came here and did extraordinary work. The cruelty was not that he had read it. The cruelty was the pride in his voice, as if proving my fear correct made us close. I signed nothing. Instead, I asked to take the affidavit home. Allowed it because he believed time alone would turn fear into obedience. Before I left, he touched my shoulder. Wanted your job, he said. She hated that I trusted you. There it was again, trust used as a chain. At home, I removed the recorder from my coat. The file was empty. Not corrupted, empty. My phone had recorded 87 minutes of silence. I checked the lining. A thin silver disc clung beneath the button, no larger than a coin. A local signal jammer. Dorian had not missed the recorder. He had neutralized it. At 2:13 a.m., an email appeared from his private address. The message had been scheduled before her death. Subject, if I am dead, he picked you. The body contained one sentence. He chose you because you know how to make lies sound merciful. Below it was a link to a password-protected archive and a clue. The first thing you buried for US. I knew the answer. 3 years earlier, a Halcyon trial participant named Crane collapsed after taking our experimental trauma drug. Internal reports showed a dangerous heart interaction. Told me the reports were preliminary, while supplied doctors who blamed an undiagnosed condition. I wrote the statement that buried the safety signal. The password was MARIBEL. The archive opened. Inside were vendor ledgers, internal chats, audio clips, and a list of initials beside dates. Some names I recognized. Regulators, consultants, journalists, former employees. Besides, several were payments from a company called Blue Mercy Holdings. At the bottom of the list was EA. Beside my initials, selected, condition, deployed. A video file sat beneath the ledger. Appeared on screen in a hotel room without makeup, staring directly at the camera. If you are watching this, she said, has either killed me or convinced someone else that killing me was loyalty. She lifted a folder. Blue Mercy is not a slush fund. It is a cemetery. The video glitched, then resumed. There were 5 deaths in the Arden trial. Halcyon reported 2. The other 3 were paid, threatened, and erased. You wrote the public statements, but you did not know the names. Leaned closer. I did. For a moment, I saw no victim. I saw an accomplice trying to choose the timing of her conscience. She continued, keeps originals in the blue room. Do not trust Victor. Do not trust. And if Jonah Pike contacts you, listen before they make him disappear. The video ended. My intercom buzzed. A man's voice said, my name is Jonah Pike. Told me you would know what Blue Mercy means. Then he added, I have proof she helped murder a patient. Jonah refused to enter my building. He waited beneath the awning of a closed pharmacy, thin and shivering despite the mild night. He was a data integrity analyst at Halcyon, the kind of employee executives called essential but never invited upstairs. I had seen him in elevators carrying 2 laptops and avoiding eye contact. Now his eyes moved constantly. Turn off your phone, he said. It is off. Remove the battery. It doesn't come out. Then leave it in the mailbox. We walked 6 blocks before he spoke again. The Arden trial had tested a neural drug designed to suppress traumatic memory. In investor presentations, called it a future without fear. In raw data, the drug caused heart arrhythmias, dissociation, and episodes of extreme suggestibility. Patients agreed to treatment, I said. They agreed to the protocol filed with regulators, not the protocol Halcyon ran. Jonah showed me screenshots of timestamp changes, deleted adverse events, and notes from a trial monitor named Bell. Had tried to halt enrollment after a patient died during an unauthorized dosage increase. Officially left the company. In reality, she disappeared. Approved the data edits, Jonah said. Victor paid the sites, authorized everything. And the murders. Jonah's mouth tightened. Crane woke during a dissociative episode and recorded instructing a physician to remove trial medication from the room before emergency services arrived. Survived the overdose for 6 days. Visited her in the hospital. What happened? The monitors were disconnected for 11 minutes. I stopped walking. You think killed her? I know was there. I know died during those 11 minutes. I know Blue Mercy paid the physician and the night supervisor. The city moved around us. Taxis, sirens, people laughing outside a bar. It felt obscene that the world could remain ordinary while a hidden version of it opened beneath my feet. Why didn't you go to police? Jonah gave a bitter smile. Did. She met with federal investigators 3 weeks ago and asked for immunity. So her conscience had come with terms. What did she offer? Everything: trial fraud, bribery, surveillance, blackmail. But she kept file back. What? Why? Insurance. Jonah handed me a small key, no label. Said the Blue Room is not a room. It is a server cage at Halcyon's disaster recovery site in Queens. Victor keeps offline drives there. This opens the outer cabinet. How do we get inside? We don't, not yet. A black SUV turned the corner slowly. Jonah gripped my arm and pulled me into a laundromat. The SUV stopped across the street. Tinted windows, engine running. He looked close to panic. Dorian, I asked. Maybe. Why would send you to me? Because she didn't trust anyone clean. I stared at him. She said clean people panic when they learn what survival costs. Guilty people calculate. The sentence hurt because it was true. I had spent years calculating how much truth a company could survive. The SUV moved on. Jonah exhaled. There's something else. Your voice message too was generated from media training recordings. Ran those sessions. She built the model, but the source audio was collected for months. By who? Everyone. He explained that microphones in conference rooms, wellness booths, and executive cars fed a private analytics system. Halcyon called it sentiment mapping. Used it to predict resistance, loyalty, and vulnerability. The company did not merely know what employees said. It knew when they were afraid. Jonah stepped toward the rear exit. Go back to accept his deal. Make him think's file frighten you into obedience. And you. I will copy the Blue Room. Alone. He looked at me with exhausted contempt. You still think this is a workplace? It is a crime scene with salaries. He disappeared into the alley. The next morning, Halcyon announced that Jonah Pike had resigned for personal reasons. At noon, his body was found beneath the Brooklyn Bridge. The police called Jonah's death a probable suicide before they had finished identifying him. A folded note was found in his coat. It apologized for stealing trial data and falsely accusing executives. The signature looked perfect. So did my voice on phone. Detective Brooks met me in a diner near the courthouse. She arrived alone, ordered coffee, and placed Jonah's key on the table. We found this taped inside his shoe, she said. I kept my face still. Do you know what it opens? No. She studied me. You met him last night. My throat tightened. There are cameras on every block, she continued. You walked together for 22 minutes. I was scared. Of him. Of whoever was following him. Brooks slid a photograph across the table. The black SUV from the night before was registered to a Halcyon security contractor. Dorian Wren says it was conducting protective surveillance on you at Rook's request. Protective? That word does a lot of work in your company. I told her about scheduled email, but not the archive. I told her Jonah believed trial data had been. I did not mention the Blue Room. Brooks listened without interrupting. Why are you holding something back? She asked. Because every person who tells the truth around Halcyon dies. Her expression did not change, but she lowered her voice. Then stop handing truth to people who can be bought. She looked toward the window. A man in a gray coat stood across the street pretending to read his phone. My partner accessed your case file at 3:12 this morning, she said. He was not assigned to it. Is he bought? I don't know yet. She pushed Jonah's key closer. I never gave you this. Then she stood and left. I returned to Halcyon that afternoon. The board had reinstated me on a limited basis. Officially, I was assisting with crisis communications. In reality, wanted me visible, grateful, and close enough to control. Hugged me in the hallway. Her perfume was the same one she wore during our media recording sessions. I am so sorry, she whispered, for resetting my password. She pulled back. You asked me to. No, I didn't. Her eyes filled instantly. Could cry faster than most people could lie. Said you might not remember everything clearly. The sentence was a key turning in a lock. I let my face crumble. I haven't been sleeping, I said. Maybe I did. Relief relaxed her mouth. She took me to my office. Someone had removed S's name from the executive directory. The company was already teaching the building to forget her. On my desk sat a binder labeled messaging options. The preferred narrative described as a brilliant but troubled leader who died during a conflict with a colleague. My name was not printed, but it hovered over every sentence. Entered without knocking. You came back, he said. I need your help. I hated how easily the words came. He closed the door and placed both hands on my shoulders. Then let me help. I signed the affidavit with one change. I wrote that had implied she possessed damaging information, not that she tried to blackmail. He accepted it. That was when I understood he did not need a perfect lie. He needed my name attached to any version of one. After he left, I accessed the internal patient relations archive. My credentials still worked because wanted me useful. I searched Blue Mercy. Nothing. I searched the initials from S's list. 3 patient profiles appeared, each marked withdrawn. All 3 addresses were invalid. Emergency contacts disconnected. Death certificates unavailable. At the bottom of one file was an internal note. Family settled. EVA language approved. I had never approved it. Someone had used my name as a seal on disappearances I did not know existed. Then a message appeared on my screen from an anonymous internal account. Stop searching the dead. A second message followed. You are sitting in CEO's chair. I looked down. Beneath the desk, a red light blinked. The red light belonged to a camera smaller than my thumbnail. I did not remove it. Removing it would tell them I knew. Instead, I bent to adjust my shoe and smiled as if embarrassed by my own clumsiness. Then I opened a draft press release and spent 20 minutes editing adjectives while my pulse tried to escape through my throat. At 6, I told I needed air. She offered to come with me. I need to be alone. Her concern sharpened, said you shouldn't isolate, had turned surveillance into care so completely that refusing it looked ill. I agreed to walk with her. Outside, I asked about the media training recordings. She said the software vendor retained samples to improve speech analysis. When I asked whether those samples could clone a voice, she laughed too loudly. That sounds paranoid. The word landed exactly where wanted it. I apologized, squeezed my arm. You can trust me. That night I entered the disaster recovery site in Queens using credentials from the archive. The building looked like a refrigerated warehouse. Jonah's key opened the outer cabinet exactly as he said. Inside were 6 encrypted drives and a handwritten card. If this cabinet is open, check the camera first. I looked up. A dome camera faced the cage. Its red light was off. Someone had disabled it before I arrived. A sound came from the corridor. I hid behind the equipment rack as Victor entered carrying a laptop bag. He moved quickly without his usual courtroom calm. He opened the cabinet, saw one drive missing, and swore. I looked at my hands. I had not taken a drive. Victor called someone. She got here first, he said. No, not moved one before she died. A pause. I handled because you said the archive was complete. The words stopped my breathing. Victor listened, then said, Do not threaten me, I know where is. He ended the call. For several seconds, the server fans were the only sound. Then Victor spoke into the darkness. If you are here, you have 30 seconds to decide whether we are enemies. I did not move. He walked directly to my hiding place. Jonah always chose obvious shadows, he said. I stepped out. Victor looked older than he had that morning. Sweat darkened his collar. You killed. I stopped from detonating 20 years of crimes she helped commit. That is not a denial. He glanced at the corridor. Ordered Dorian to scare her. Dorian refused, called me. And you obeyed. I believed she had already sent the evidence. So you murdered her because it might be too late. His face twisted. You think monsters arrive as monsters. They arrive as exceptions. One signature to protect a company. One payment to protect a trial. One death to protect everyone who already crossed the line. I thought of every statement I had written. Where is the missing drive? Hid it with Belle. Disappeared years ago. Victor gave a humorless smile. No, she was hidden. A phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked the screen and went pale. What? He showed me a security feed from the Halcyon parking garage. A body lay beside Victor's car. Dorian Wren's. Police lights flashed at the entrance. Victor looked at me. Is removing everyone who can name the first crime. Then alarms erupted through the server building. On the screen, the camera feed changed. The body beside the car was not Dorian. It was Jonah Pike, and according to the timestamp, the footage had been recorded 2 hours before I met Jonah alive. The footage of Jonah's body was a rehearsal. System-generated simulations using real camera feeds, employee faces, and archived voice data. Halcyon called the platform Forecast. Investors believed it predicted workplace risk. In practice, it showed executives how a lie would look before they made it real. Victor stared at the screen, as if he had finally seen the machine from outside. Forecast model's death, he said. The boardroom angle, your badge entry, the glass. You knew they were framing me. I knew wanted a contingency suspect. A contingency suspect. My life reduced to a phrase lawyers could bill by the hour. Victor said had helped design the plan months earlier, when feared I might discover the patient files. She collected my voice samples, approved surveillance, and drafted complaints describing me as jealous and unstable. Later, when she decided to seek immunity, she tried to remove my name from the operation. Not out of remorse, because she needed me as a witness. She wrote EA on her hand, I said. Evidence archive, Victor replied. Not your initials. The revelation should have relieved me. Instead, it made the framing feel colder. Even her dying message had been interpreted through a trap they built around my identity. Victor offered a deal. He would give me access to Forecast and the trial records if I helped him obtain federal protection. Why should I trust you? You should not trust the fact that wants me dead. We agreed to communicate through drafts in an abandoned legal database. It was the kind of arrangement only guilty people called practical. The next morning, summoned me to his penthouse office. He had seen my entry at the Queen's site. Of course he had. I prepared denials. He surprised me by smiling. You are finally asking the right questions, he said. Which questions? How much of yourself you are willing to lose to survive? He poured coffee and asked whether Victor had frightened me. I said Victor blamed him for his death. Laughed quietly. Victor killed her with your award. He panicked. I'm trying to protect the company from his collapse. Did you tell him to go to the boardroom? I tell many people many things. Adults choose what they become. It was the closest thing to an admission he would offer. Then he placed a new employment agreement in front of me. It doubled my compensation, granted stock at the IPO, and named me interim chief operating officer. Chair, you want me to replace the woman you say I killed. I want the market to see that we believe in you. What do you believe about me? His gaze settled on my face with almost tender attention. That you can live with knowledge. I signed, looked pleased. He believed money had completed what fear began. For the next week, I let him rewrite me. I appeared at staff meetings and praised Halcyon's resilience. I approved statements that called murder an isolated tragedy. I allowed to rehearse my answers, while hidden microphones collected more of my voice. I stopped flinching when Dorian followed me. I laughed its jokes. I became useful again. At night, Victor sent fragments from Forecast. One simulation showed me confessing to murder. Another showed me dying in a car accident before trial. A third showed delivering a memorial speech about my tragic psychological decline. Every future he imagined ended with his voice explaining me. Then Victor uploaded a file called Blue Room NAOMI. The video showed a woman in a private care facility, older than her employee photo but alive. Belle looked into the camera and said, "Did not kill Crane." She paused. "Oh, did?" I watched the accusation 12 times. Each time the sentence remained impossible. I had never met Crane. I had never entered the hospital where she died. On the date of her death, I was in Washington managing a mayoral scandal. There were flights, hotel records, television appearances. Then Victor sent the rest of the file, explained that was not a person in the Blue Mercy ledgers. It was a code phrase used for communications interventions. Erase, amend, redirect, deny. Yeah. My initials had become an internal verb. When a patient's story needed to disappear, executives wrote EVA ARDEN approved even before I joined Halcyon. Later hired me because my real name made the old code look legitimate. The company had not selected me after due diligence. It had built a human alibi around a pre-existing lie. I sat on my kitchen floor until morning. At 9, Halcyon's wellness director called and reminded me of a mandatory therapy session. I had forgotten it was scheduled, or perhaps I had never scheduled it. The therapist, Dr. Fenn, appeared on screen with a calm face and soft gray room behind him. He asked how I felt returning to work after his death. "Observed," I said. He smiled. "Trauma can create hypervigilance. What would create appropriate vigilance? Let's stay with your feelings." He guided me through questions about sleep, anger, memory, and thoughts of self-harm. The wording sounded clinical, but the sequence felt like an interrogation. I asked whether our sessions were confidential, within the boundaries of safety, and your employer's wellness agreement. Does receive summaries. His eyes moved slightly toward another screen. No individual is given raw therapy content. Not an answer. I leaned closer. Forecast uses therapy data, doesn't it? The call disconnected. 5 minutes later, entered my office. "You upset Dr. Fenn." I looked at the camera beneath my desk and imagined it looking back. I asked about confidentiality. "He is concerned you are becoming paranoid." "Are you concerned?" "I am always concerned about you." He closed the door. "Grief and accusation can destabilize anyone. If you need medical leave, we can arrange private care." Private care had been hidden in private care for 4 years. I let my breathing quicken. I put one hand against the desk as if steadying myself. Moved closer. "What if I am losing track?" I whispered. His face softened with victory. "Then let me hold the facts for you." I began to cry. Not because I was breaking, but because I finally understood how he loved people, as editable documents. He handed me a tissue and suggested I rest in the executive wellness suite. I agreed. The suite contained a reclining chair, a biometric monitor, and a locked medication cabinet. While spoke to the nurse outside, I inserted Jonah's key into the cabinet. It opened. Inside were labeled envelopes containing pills, hair samples, and access cards for senior employees. Mine contained strands of hair, a blood vial, and a duplicate badge. This envelope was empty. Victor's contained a bottle of beta blockers and a note in handwriting. "Heart event plausible." I photographed everything. Then I saw this envelope. Inside was a passport under a different name, and a one-way ticket to Zurich dated 2 days after the IPO. Had not been coerced. She had an exit plan. The door handle moved. I closed the cabinet and lay back in the chair. Entered carrying a glass of water. She smiled at me with tears already waiting in her eyes. "Says you finally understand you're sick," she said. Then she locked the door behind her, set the water beside me, and pulled a chair close. "You should have signed the first statement," she said. Her voice had changed. The softness was gone. Without it, she sounded older. "You cloned me. I trained the model. For the company." The distinction mattered to her. People needed an institution large enough to hide inside. She told me Forecast began as a tool to test investor reactions. They fed it executive interviews, employee calls, private coaching sessions. Soon it could generate convincing audio and video. Saw the potential for litigation defense. Victor saw blackmail, saw immortality. "And you?" I asked. "I saw leverage." Smiled. "You never noticed me until you needed something formatted. I promoted you." "What?" "You promoted me after told you to." She had spent years close enough to learn my passwords, gestures, and cadence. She knew which phrases I used when angry and how my voice sounded after 1 glass of wine. The voicemail too had taken her 4 minutes to generate. "Did you know Victor would kill her?" I knew there would be a confrontation. That is how Victor talks. That is how adults talk when outcomes are expensive. I almost laughed. They had all learned the same language and mistaken it for intelligence. Said the police case against me would disappear if I accepted treatment and resigned after the IPO. Would fund an apartment overseas. My name would survive. Why not just kill me? Because dead women become questions. Broken women become warnings. There was the company's philosophy in one sentence. I looked toward the locked door. "What did promise you?" Her face shifted. "She promised to take me with her. But she didn't. She made a deal with investigators and named me. So you helped frame me instead. I chose the person who was still alive. I let silence expand until she needed to fill it." "Did kill Jonah?" I asked. "Dorian moved him from the bridge after the fall. The note was generated. Was he alive when Dorian moved him?" Looked at the water. That answer was enough. I asked about. Said had been kept sedated under a false diagnosis because she possessed the original trial logs. Moved her months earlier. No one knew where. "Except Victor," I said. "Victor thinks he knows." Stood. "Drink, it will help you sleep." I lifted the glass and let it touch my lips. The water tasted faintly metallic. She watched until I swallowed. I had not swallowed. When she turned to unlock the door, I spat the water into the blanket and slumped sideways. Cold. She took it, she said. Yes, I'll move her after the building clears. Her shoes crossed the room. The door opened and closed. I waited 30 seconds, then sat up. The hallway was empty. I left through the service stairs and called Detective Brooks from a pay phone. She answered with one word. Where? I gave her the address of the Queen's server site and told her about the drives. She said a warrant was already moving, but someone had alerted Halcyon. Who? My partner is gone. His apartment is empty. Before I could respond, the wellness suite alarm began upstairs. My face appeared on every hallway screen beneath a security notice. A-risk employee, do not approach, call security. The building doors locked. Over the speakers, my own voice began confessing to murder. My synthetic confession followed me down 40 flights of stairs. I confronted because she threatened to expose my relationship with, my voice said. I brought the award. I wanted to frighten her. The recording included breaths, hesitations, and a sob I recognized from a speech coaching exercise. Had stitched my fear into murder. On the 32nd floor, Dorian entered the stairwell below me. He called, "Stop running." I climbed upward instead. He followed without hurry. The locks, cameras, and building itself belonged to him. I was the only person wasting energy. At the 35th floor, I exited into the finance department. Employees stared as the confession played through ceiling speakers. Some backed away. One woman lifted her phone to record me. I ran into his former office. Her shelves had been cleared, but one framed photograph remained. I lifted it. Stood beside Bell at an industry conference 6 years earlier. On the back, had written a hotel name and the date of Halcyon's IPO. The Mercer House, room 814. Dorian's footsteps approached. I opened the window panel behind his desk. During fire drills, she once joked that executives always demanded secret exits. A narrow maintenance corridor led to the adjacent tower. I crossed and emerged inside a law firm's copy room. By the time Dorian reached his office, I was descending another building. Detective Brooks met me in an underground garage. She had obtained the Queen's drives before Halcyon's team arrived, but 4 were wiped remotely. 2 survived. One contained forecast simulations. The other contains private diary. We watched it in an unmarked car, spoke into the camera over several months. She described her affair with without romance. He used sex to create secrets, then used secrets to create obedience. She believed she was different because she understood the mechanism. I thought knowing it was manipulation made me immune, she said. It only made me proud of tolerating it. She admitted authorizing surveillance, bribing trial sites, and helping hide. She described death, entered the hospital room during the 11-minute blackout, waited outside, and later paid the staff. She did not see him kill. She saw him leave, had stayed because promised the company would be hers. When he began preparing me as a public successor, she understood he was replacing her with a cleaner version. Her jealousy was real, so was her attempt to frame me. Months before her death, created the complaints, my badge, and helped build the voice model. She planned to trigger the frame if I ever threatened her position. Then Jonah showed her proof, had arranged disappearance, and paid for 2 additional deaths. Approached investigators. I did not become good, she said. I became afraid of being the next body. On the final recording, made the night she died, held up a portable drive. This contains call to Victor and video from the boardroom. I left it with, if I survive tonight, I will trade it for immunity. If I die, may find her. Smiled faintly. I am sorry I chose you as the scapegoat. I am not sorry enough to sacrifice myself for you. That is the honest version. The recording ended. Brooks looked at the photograph from his office. The Mercer House, she said. That is tomorrow. We drove there before dawn. Room 814 was registered to Bell under an assumed name. The door stood open. Inside, the bed was untouched. A portable drive sat on the desk beside a fresh cup of coffee. On the mirror, written in lipstick, were 5 words. The IPO is the murder weapon. Had left the room less than 10 minutes before us. The coffee was warm. The bathroom mirror still fogged at the edges. On the desk, the portable drive required a biometric key we did not have. Detective Brooks searched the room while I studied the lipstick message. The IPO is the murder weapon. Halcyon's public offering would convert private fraud into public wealth. Once the shares floated, and the board could cash out before trial data collapsed. Pension funds and ordinary investors would inherit the risk. Patients would inherit silence. but's wording suggested something more immediate. The IPO event was scheduled at Halcyon's headquarters, broadcast live to investors in New York and London. Insisted on using forecast to generate real-time sentiment graphics. The system would connect to every screen, microphone, and camera in the building. A murder weapon could also be a delivery system. Brooks found a receipt for a prepaid phone. One number had been called repeatedly. Victor S. We arranged a meeting through the abandoned legal database. Victor chose an unfinished office tower near the river. He arrived carrying a hard case and wearing no coat despite the cold. Contacted me, he said. She wants immunity, transport, and $10 million. For what? The original drive and her testimony. She left the drive. No, she left a decoy. The real archive is inside forecast. What? Victor explained that embedded the evidence into a training model scheduled to deploy during the IPO. The archive would reveal itself only when the system heard a specific phrase spoken in its voice. What phrase? Brooks asked. Victor looked at me. The sentence he used after died. I knew it from old crisis notes. No one remembers the patient if the company survives. Had said it in a closed meeting. Recorded him. If he says the phrase during the... Victor continued. Forecast will unlock the archive and push it to every connected screen. Why would he say it? He would not plan to synthesize it. A voice clone of the same weapon they used against me. Victor opened the hard case. Inside was a small network device, designed to inject audio into the IPO system. Made this, he said, has the activation key. Brooks asked the question I had avoided. Did you kill? Victor looked through the glass wall at the gray river. Yes. The word was almost peaceful. Called him after threatened to expose Blue Mercy. Victor went to the boardroom to negotiate. Laughed at his offer and played a recording of ordering him to resolve her permanently. Victor struck her with the award when she reached for her phone. Was it planned? I asked. I had already placed your glass and badge data. The plan existed. I only completed it. His honesty was worse than denial. Brooks reached for her cuffs. Victor lifted one hand. Arrest me and erases before noon. How do you know where she is? I don't, but he does. A red dot appeared on Victor's chest. I saw it a second before the glass exploded. Brooks pulled me down. Victor fell behind the conference table. Blood spread beneath his shoulder, but he was breathing. The shot had come from the unfinished tower opposite us. Dorian, Brooks called for backup. Victor gripped my sleeve. Listen, we'll not cancel the IPO. He needs the money before the warrants land. Where is? He pushed the network device into my hands. Ask the camera. Above the glass wall, a construction camera rotated toward us. Its lens blinked red. Then the building speakers came alive with his voice. He said, bring me this device or dies on the opening bell. Victor survived the gunshot. The bullet passed through his shoulder, close enough to frighten him and far enough to make me wonder whether Dorian had intended a warning. Brooks placed him under guard in a hospital using a false name. Before surgery, Victor gave us access to the legal database and 3 sealed affidavits, each named. None mentioned Victor's own murder of until the final page. He had prepared his conscience like a contract, with liability carefully allocated. Why didn't you leave? I asked him. He laughed once. People ask that as if leaving restores the person who first stayed. Had recruited Victor after a pharmaceutical fraud case 20 years earlier. Victor buried a witness statement, promoted him. Each crime increased Victor's value and reduced his ability to walk away. He never threatened me at first, Victor said. He praised me. That was the architecture of Halcyon. Fear came after gratitude when escape would look like betrayal. Detective Brooks wanted to cancel the IPO event and raid the building. Federal agents were preparing warrants, but the remaining evidence was fragmented, and lawyers had already claimed Victor acted alone. Without, or the archive could survive long enough to disappear. I received a message from, come back, SILAS will trade NAOMI for the device. Alone. Brooks said it was a trap. Of course it is, I said. The question is what he wants me to see. I returned to Halcyon wearing a wire provided by the police. Dorian met me in the lobby. He searched every seam and found it within seconds. He placed the transmitter in my palm. You should know better, he said. Why are you still helping him? Dorian's face remained blank. Because Jonah was alive when I found him and has the footage. There it was, another chain. You let him die. I followed the medical protocol I was given. Do you hear yourself? All the time. He escorted me to the boardroom where died. The carpet had been replaced. My award was gone. A new glass table reflected the city. Sat at the far end with beside him. On a monitor appeared tied to a chair in a windowless room. She was conscious. "Give me the device," said. "Let her go. After the IPO." "What? You will kill her after the IPO." His expression suggested disappointment. "You keep confusing prediction with certainty." I placed the device on the table, but kept one hand over it. Built an archive into forecast. Glanced at. She looked genuinely startled. Good, he had not told her everything. "What phrase unlocks it?" he asked. "I don't know." He smiled. "Then you are less useful than I hoped." I told him Victor confessed. Called Victor a frightened murderer trying to transfer blame. "You ordered him to resolve." "I ordered him to resolve a dispute." "And?" His eyes hardened for the first time. "That patient died because a company cannot be built around every individual tragedy." Close to the phrase, but not enough. On the monitor, lifted her head. "Ask him about the stairwell," she said. Muted her. "What stairwell?" I asked. Looked at him. A fracture appeared between them. Stood. "Tomorrow you will take the stage beside me. You will tell investors acted alone, Victor killed her, and Halcyon protected you from false suspicion. And if I refuse..." He touched the screen showing, "I do not need you to believe the story. I need your face inside it." I let go of the device. Picked it up. That was what I wanted. The device in his hand was a copy. The real one was already inside the IPO control room. The copy contained a microphone, not a police wire. Dorian would have recognized the frequency. It recorded locally and transmitted through the same forecast network trusted. For 2 hours, I sat in the boardroom and let him explain the version of reality he expected me to repeat. Had manipulated trial data. Victor had killed her. Jonah had stolen information and taken his own life. Was a delusional former employee being protected from herself. Was the only person holding the company together. He never confessed to murder. He confessed to authorship. He described placing my glass at the scene, approving the synthetic voicemail, and instructing to create a history of conflict between and me. He called it narrative containment. He admitted authorizing Dorian to move Jonah's body and destroy the original note. He admitted using therapy records to predict how I would respond under pressure. When I asked whether he told Victor to kill, smiled. I told Victor what failure would cost him. The action belonged to him. A confession without a murder. Enough to destroy him publicly. Perhaps not enough to convict him for. Sat very still. She had begun to understand that version left room for only one surviving architect. "What happens to me after tomorrow?" she asked. Did not look at her. "Your travel arrangements remain. Zurich, if the event succeeds. And if it does." He finally turned. "Then travel will not solve your problem." His face emptied. Dismissed her. When the door closed, he moved around the table and stood behind me. "You wanted to be important," he said. "I wanted to do work that mattered. That is what ambitious people say when they dislike the price." His hands rested on the back of my chair. "You are not innocent. You buried. You defended Halcyon after every death. You accept its job after seeing her body. Each sentence was true in the way poison is true inside water." "I know." The answer surprised him. He wanted denial. Denial would let him become the only adult in the room. "I helped you," I continued. "I let your language protect things I did not want to inspect. I liked being trusted by power. That guilt belongs to me." I turned to face him. "But's murder belongs to Victor. Jonah's death belongs to Dorian. His death belongs to the person who entered her room, and the system that made all of them useful belongs to you." His expression changed. Not anger. Recognition. For the first time, he saw that shame would not make me quiet. He leaned close. "No one remembers the patient if the company survives." The phrase, somewhere inside Halcyon, the real device heard him. A small green light appeared beneath the boardroom camera. The archive unlocked. Every screen in the room flashed blue. Files began copying to the IPO network. Looked upward. "What did you do?" Before I could answer, returned with Dorian and struck me across the face. Before returned, opened the live investor dashboard and showed me thousands of names waiting for the offering. Pension managers, university funds, hospital trusts. He wanted me to see hostages disguised as shareholders. "If this company falls tomorrow," he said, "people who never met us will lose money. That is why you rush the offering. That is why responsible people protect institutions from emotional facts." He believed scale transformed guilt into duty. The more lives tied to his success, the more criminal his failure became, and the more righteous every cover-up sounded. I asked whether ever loved him, considered the question like a market forecast. Loved being the only person allowed to see me without the mask. "What? And you?" I loved that she mistook access for equality. The last thing I saw before the sedative entered my neck was tearing the device apart while the progress bar reached 12%. I woke inside a soundproof room beneath Halcyon's auditorium. My wrists were fastened to a chair with medical restraints. A camera faced me. Behind it, a screen displayed a script. My final confession. It said I killed in a jealous rage, manipulated Jonah into stealing data, and fabricated allegations against after he rejected me. It concluded with an apology to Halcyon's employees and investors. Stood behind the camera, adjusting lights. How much, I asked. Enough to create a problem, not enough to prove the deaths. We'll blame you. He already has. Her voice broke on the last word. The passport in the wellness cabinet was fake. The Zurich ticket led to a private airfield controlled by a Halcyon contractor. Had finally checked the details. There was never an exit, I said. She slapped me again, but without conviction. Read the script. No, Forecast can generate it without you. Then why am I alive? Because live capture was better. Because wanted pupil movement, breath, and to perfect the synthetic video. He wanted my body to teach the machine how to erase me. Dorian entered carrying the real network device. He had removed it from the control room before the full archive deployed. Where is, I asked. He ignored me. Did not. Service stairwell C, she said. There is an old medical suite below the garage. Dorian turned sharply, raised both hands. He's going to kill all of us. You knew that years ago, Dorian said. The door opened, entered in shirt sleeves, calm again. He looked at Leave. She hesitated. No. After she left, pulled a chair close to mine. You almost impressed me, he said. Almost. You still believe exposure is power. It is not. Attention is power. By tomorrow, every clip will have 10 interpretations. Your confession will be one more piece of content. You murdered. No jury has heard that. Did. Heard many things. Saw you. His eyes flicked toward Dorian. That was enough. Was not merely a record's witness. She saw Leaf's room. Instructed Dorian to prepare the stairwell solution. Dorian's face tightened. What is that? I asked. Smiled. An unfortunate fall by a distressed executive. He planned to release my confession after my death. Scream came through the wall. Then the lights went out. Emergency red flooded the room. The restraints around my right wrist released with a click. Had cut power from the control booth. I freed my other hand as Dorian moved toward the door. Grabbed the real device. I struck him with the camera stand and ran. The corridor split in two directions. One sign pointed to the garage, another to service stairwell C. I chose. Behind me, shouted my name with no softness left in it. At the bottom of the stairs, I found the medical suite. Was strapped to a bed, an IV line in her arm. I pulled it free. Her eyes opened. Did he say the phrase? She whispered. Yes. Then's archive is awake. Only 12%. Smiled weakly. 12% to Halcyon. She reached beneath the mattress and removed a tiny transmitter. The rest went somewhere he cannot delete. Above us, the IPO countdown screens turned on. As I worked at the restraints, the screen replayed trial versions of my confession. In one, I wept. In another, I stared coldly into the lens. A score beside each version predicted public belief. The tearful version tested as manipulative. The calm version tested as psychopathic. A third, where I trembled but spoke clearly, tested best. There had never been a correct way for me to appear. Forecast did not search for truth. It searched for the most profitable shape of guilt. Had simulated my grief before died. He had tested my face against an audience that did not yet know my name. That was when fear stopped feeling personal. I was not inside his mind. I was inside a product. 4 hours until the opening bell. Detective Brooks entered the garage with federal agents 3 minutes after, and I reached it. Had called emergency services, then vanished. Dorian surrendered without resistance. Was gone. The raid found sedatives, badges, hidden cameras, and the synthetic confession studio. It did not find the original archive. Refused to reveal where she sent it until she received a signed immunity agreement. She was Still's ally in that way. Survival first, truth second. By dawn, Halcyon's lawyers obtained an emergency order allowing the IPO event to proceed. They argued that was cooperating. Victor acted alone, and rogue employees had compromised systems. Markets hate uncertainty, but they hate delay more when billions are waiting. Issued a statement from an undisclosed location. He called me a traumatized executive, manipulated by a criminal conspiracy. He called medically vulnerable. He called missing. At 7, Victor sent me a calendar file from his hospital bed. It belonged to Jonah. Jonah had scheduled meetings under names of dead trial patients. Each appointment corresponded to a location where evidence was stored. One entry appeared for IPO morning. MARIBEL, observation deck, 928. The Halcyon Auditorium had an observation deck above the stage. Brooks wanted to search it immediately, stopped her. If knows you found the calendar, he will not appear. You expect him to attend. He cannot stay away. The IPO is not money to him. It is proof that reality belongs to whoever rings the bell. Finally explained Archive. The data was split across dozens of dead drop servers. The phrase unlocked 12% locally and sent activation requests to the rest. But the final release required a live biometric match from and a second voice key from. Is dead, Brooks said. Forecast has her voice. The system that framed me could also authenticate the dead. Possessed the model. At 8:12, she called me from Jonah's number. I am on the observation deck, she said. I have's voice key. Come down. No, has my passport, my accounts, and every recording. If I surrender, I become the only living woman he can blame. You helped him murder. What? I helped him frame you. Victor killed. You helped move Jonah. Silence. He was breathing, I said. I know. Her voice collapsed. She offered a bargain. I would get her immunity, and she would release the archive during the broadcast. You do not have enough time for immunity, I said. Then promise you will tell them I helped at the end. The request was almost childlike. Not forgiveness, credit. I will tell the truth, I said. All of it. She laughed bitterly. That is not the same promise. No. At 8:45, Halcyon's auditorium filled with employees, investors, journalists, and cameras. Appeared backstage wearing a navy suit and no visible fear. Federal agents could not arrest him for murder yet, and his lawyers surrounded him like armor. He saw me beside Detective Brooks. He said warmly, as if greeting me at breakfast, I am relieved you are safe. The cameras captured my silence. At 9:20, the countdown began. I looked toward the observation deck. A figure stood behind the tinted glass. Then another figure rose behind her. Was on stage. The man behind was Dorian, but Dorian was in federal custody. The figure stepped into the light. Brooks showed me the warrant stacked on her tablet. Everyone depended on a judge accepting that synthetic evidence could be both convincing and false. Halcyon's lawyers argued that no recording could be trusted. Not mine, not S, not Evan's. After using artificial voices as weapons, they intended to make reality itself inadmissible. That is the final defense, said. Not proving innocence, making proof impossible. I understood why the IPO mattered beyond money. Once millions watched in real time, his body would become the authentication key. Had designed the only evidence his lawyers could not easily dismiss. His live face unlocking records created before the scandal. Detective Brooks's missing partner raised a gun. Brooks saw the gun at the same moment I did. She spoke into her sleeve, but the auditorium's security feed went black. Halcyon had rehearsed this. Forecast showed how police would respond, where agents would move, how long panic would take to spread. On stage, the host welcomed investors, smiled beneath the countdown clock. We could not fire through tinted glass into a crowded room. We could not rush the observation deck without alerting the gunman. Stood with her hands visible, voice key stored on the laptop before her. I walked onto the stage. Brooks grabbed my arm. He wants the program to continue, I whispered. So we continue. The host looked confused when I approached the podium. Recovered instantly. He announced, whose courage during an unimaginable week reminds us why Halcyon exists. Applause moved through the room because people clap when powerful men tell them what recovery looks like. I stood beside him and read the approved remarks. Was a visionary. Victor acted alone. Halcyon remained committed to truth. Each sentence tasted like rust. On the teleprompter, a private message appeared. Read exactly or TAMSIN dies. Did not look at me. His smile remained fixed for the cameras. The script shifted into my synthetic confession. I was supposed to admit that grief and jealousy had distorted my judgment. I was supposed to thank for protecting me. Instead, I spoke about Crane. She enrolled in Halcyon's ardent trial because she wanted relief from trauma, I said. She died after an unauthorized dose increase. Her death was hidden. The teleprompter flashed red, placed one hand on my elbow. Is understandably emotional, he told the audience. I continued. Bell tried to stop the trial. Jonah Pike found the data. Vane tried to trade the truth for immunity. All three were treated as risks to be contained. Murmurs spread. The observation deck gunman pressed the weapon against Sneck. She looked down at me. Then she pressed a key. voice filled the auditorium. "This is Vane, Executive Credential 7149. The smile vanished. The screens flickered. Forecast requested biometric confirmation. A camera moved towards face. He stepped back. I caught his wrist and pulled him into the frame. He shoved me hard enough that I struck the podium. Gasps rose from the audience. The camera captured his eyes, jaw, and pulse pattern. Biometric match, Silas Rook. The archive began to release. On the observation deck, the gunman fired. The glass cracked above us, fell out of sight. The crowd screamed. Agents rushed the exits, grabbed the ceremonial bell hammer, and ran backstage. I followed, not because I was brave, because the network progress bar had stopped at 98%. Held the physical kill switch. Backstage, he entered the control corridor and locked the door behind him. I used badge to follow. The corridor ended at the forecast control room. Stood before the main console, with the hammer raised over the server relay. "You still think this is about truth," he said. "It is about evidence. No, it is about which version arrives first." He swung the hammer. The audience did not know whether to leave or keep filming. Phones rose across the auditorium. Fear became content before it became action. Some investors stared at the exits, others stared at the falling valuation on their screens. Noticed, even while the archive opened, he watched the crowd measure truth against loss. That was the loyalty he understood best. "Look at them," he whispered beside me. "They do not want you to be right." For one terrible second, he was. The room wanted the bell, the price. The relief of believing a dead woman and a frightened employee had merely created noise. Then's photograph filled every screen, and wanting became harder. The lights went dark at 99%. Emergency lighting returned in red strips along the floor. Stood over the shattered relay, breathing hard. Without cameras and a tailored suit, he looked smaller, not less dangerous, smaller. The archive had stopped. He smiled. "Now we negotiate." Behind us, the door locked automatically. The control room was soundproof, built to protect broadcasts from chaos outside. Held the bell hammer like a weapon. "You killed," I said. "You have no archive. You killed Jonah. Dorian made a choice. You ordered Victor to kill. Victor made a choice. That is your whole religion, isn't it? You create the trap, then call the trapped person responsible for what happens inside it." His face tightened. "You made choices too." "Yes." The answer took power from him again. I named them. I accepted the promotion after discovering the affair. I wrote statements without demanding records. I enjoyed being the person trusted with ugly truths. I believed proximity to power meant I could control its damage. "I was guilty of helping you look clean," I said. "That does not make me guilty of your murders." Stepped closer. "The public will not understand the distinction. Then I will explain it slowly." He swung. I moved, but the hammer caught my shoulder and drove me against the console. Pain flashed white. He raised it again. The door opened. Stood there, blood running from her scalp. The gunman's shot had shattered the observation glass, not hit her. She held his weapon with both hands. Looked almost amused. "You will not shoot me." His arms shook. He was right. For years, he had trained her to need his interpretation of every act. Even rebellion required his permission. "Give me the gun," I said. She looked at me, lunged, fired into the ceiling. The blast brought agents running. Brooks entered first and ordered everyone down. Dropped the hammer and lifted his hands. Instantly, he became calm again. "This woman is unstable," he said, nodding toward. "Manipulated her." Laughed. It sounded like something breaking open. Brooks cuffed, then said the archive finished. I looked at the dark console. She explained that built the final 1% into the voice key itself. The visible progress bar was a decoy. The data had already reached journalists, regulators, prosecutors, and patient advocates before the relay broke. Everyone had chosen a side too late. Dorian agreed to cooperate after learning, planned to blame him for Jonah. Victor signed a full confession when he saw the IPO footage. Brooks's former partner surrendered at the observation deck and identified the offshore accounts that paid him. Handed over the voice models, therapy data, and synthetic files. Alone insisted he had done nothing but lead badly chosen people. As agents escorted him through the auditorium, investors and employees watched the screens. Recordings played beside trial ledgers, payment logs, and video from his hospital corridor. The final clip showed, leaving her room during the monitor blackout. He paused beneath the IPO bell. For the first time, the crowd did not applaud when he looked at them. Then every screen changed to a live feed from the control room. My confrontation with had been recorded. The soundproof room had one microphone he forgot. When agents searched, they found no passport, no cash, and no escape phone. He had not planned to flee. Flight would have admitted the world existed beyond his control. His contingency plans were all stories. Blame Victor, diagnose me, sacrifice, promote Dorian, rename Blue Mercy, relaunch Forecast under another company. Even handcuffed, he asked Brooks, who had approved the arrest language for the press release. She stared at him. He smiled. Someone will need to explain this correctly. That was the most honest thing he said all day. He could imagine prison before he could imagine silence. The ceremonial bell itself. The bell microphone captured everything, saying there was no archive, assigning every death to someone else's choice, telling me the public would never understand the difference between complicity and murder. Most importantly, it captured what he said after he thought the screens were dead. You should have let Victor finish you with. The sentence did not prove he struck anyone. It proved knowledge, planning, and intent. Combined with the call records, Victor's confession, and his archive, it was enough. The broadcast went live because rooted the bell feed through a backup stream. Investors in New York heard it. Journalists in London heard it. Employees standing 6 feet from heard his private voice before his lawyers could explain it. I played his confession at the IPO he believed would make him untouchable. Halcyon never rang the opening bell. Trading was suspended before the first share moved. Federal prosecutors charged with conspiracy, obstruction, wire fraud, unlawful surveillance, patient data theft, and charges connected to St. Jonah's deaths. Victor was charged with murder. Dorian faced charges for evidence destruction and failing to render aid. Brooks's former partner was charged with bribery and attempted kidnapping. Negotiated no miracle. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy, evidence fabrication, and obstruction. Her cooperation reduced the sentence but did not erase it. Received limited immunity for helping conceal records in exchange for full testimony and the original trial logs. The public wanted one clean heroine and one clean monster. They did not get either. Was murdered, but she had built the system that framed me. Jonah tried to expose patient deaths, but he had once altered data under pressure. Victor confessed, but only after the machinery turned toward him. Saved the archive after helping create my synthetic voice. And I had spent years converting suffering into acceptable language. At trial, Saturni asked whether I hated him. Yes, I said. The answer startled the courtroom. He expected me to perform moral distance. Did that hatred motivate you to manipulate the IPO broadcast? No. Evidence motivated me. Hatred kept me awake. He asked whether I profited from exposing Halcyon. I had signed a book contract by then, with proceeds pledged to a patient restitution fund. He called it revenge disguised as advocacy. Revenge would have been making him afraid of something imaginary, I said. I made him answer for what was real. Watch me without expression. The jury convicted him on most counts. The murder charge in death was the hardest. There was no direct footage inside the room, only the corridor, payment records, medical evidence, and testimony. He was convicted of conspiracy and manslaughter rather than intentional murder. He smiled at that partial escape. Then the judge imposed consecutive sentences for the remaining crimes. Victor was convicted of murder. In his statement, he said, created a culture where obedience felt like survival. The judge answered, Mr. Rook did not move your hand. Victor lowered his head. Outside court, reporters asked whether justice felt complete. I thought of his body under the boardroom table, Jonah breathing beside the bridge while Dorian followed protocol. His name turned into a password, reading my voice into a machine. No, I said. Complete justice would require the dead to receive the choices stolen from them. That night, a final scheduled email arrived from subject when he falls. The message contained one attachment, a list of 37 people Halcyon had prepared to frame next. My name was not first. It was merely the first one they had activated. Halcyon was dismantled in pieces. Its patents were sold under court supervision. Trial data went to independent researchers. The wellness platform that fed therapy notes into Forecast was shut down, then investigated in 3 countries. Patients received notices explaining that their most private confessions had been converted into risk scores for executives. The notices used language I helped write. This time I refused every softening phrase. We did not say data may have been accessed. We said Halcyon stole it. We did not say adverse events were underreported. We named the dead: Crane, Thomas Red, Shaw, Lewis Grant, 2 others whose records had been hidden beneath vendor codes. The Patient Restitution Fund was built from seized executive assets, insurance settlements, and the remains of the IPO reserve. Joined the oversight board after completing her cooperation agreement. Detective Brooks declined a public role but attended the first meeting and sat in the last row. Wrote me from prison. Her letter was 8 pages long. She explained her childhood, her ambitions, grooming, betrayal, and the terror of being ordinary. Every paragraph asked me to understand her so thoroughly that understanding might become acquittal. I answered with 4 sentences. I understand how he used you. I understand what you wanted. I also understand what you did to me and to Jonah. Understanding is not the same as release. Victor never wrote every month. At first, his letters threatened appeals and lawsuits. Later, they became philosophical. He claimed I had built a career from his downfall. He said I still used his methods whenever I shaped a public story. He said the company survived inside me. That accusation frightened me because part of it was true. I still noticed which facts would move an audience. I still knew how to place a pause before a name and how to make anger sound controlled. Skills do not become innocent when their owner changes purpose. So I created rules. No anonymous suffering. No therapy language used as character evidence. No victim turned into a symbol before becoming a person. No story that made one villain large enough to hide everyone who assisted. A year after the IPO, the old Halcyon Auditorium reopened as a public evidence archive. The IPO bell remained above the stage, sealed behind glass. Beneath it, a plaque explained that the microphone hidden inside captured the statement that helped expose the conspiracy. Visitors always asked whether I planned that detail. I told them the truth. No, did not plan every outcome. Neither did I. Powerful people survive by convincing everyone that their control is total. Sometimes the first act of resistance is noticing the machine has gaps. On opening night, I played the final clip from diary. She looked exhausted and afraid. If survives, she said, she may be tempted to tell this as a story about defeating. That would be easier. The harder truth is that he needed many of us. He needed my ambition, Victor's cowardice, resentment, Dorian's obedience, and talent for beautiful language. He did not build Halcyon alone. None of us gets to leave the graveyard by pointing at the man holding the map. The room remained silent after the video ended. I stepped to the microphone. The Stoics wrote that we cannot control what happens, only what we choose next, I said. That idea becomes dangerous when it is used to excuse systems designed to narrow every choice. Accountability begins by naming the trap and still naming the hand that acted inside it. Afterward, I walked alone through the former executive floor. The office was empty. My old office still had a pale square on the carpet where the hidden camera had watched me. The boardroom had been preserved for investigators, its glass table reflecting the city. I stood where I found. For a long time, I waited to feel victory. What came instead was clarity. Had spent years teaching us that survival required becoming useful to him. He was wrong. Survival began when usefulness stopped being the measure of a life. My phone vibrated. A journalist had received leaked files from another technology company using synthetic voices to discredit employees. The message asked whether I would review them. I looked once more at the boardroom, then turned off the lights. The company had been built on graves. The next story did not have to be.
I was a